and the person who has to pull the trigger. They are in a sort of an odd symbiosis. And the gun, to me, has always been somewhat threatening and alarming as a kind of principle of incipient violence that's in the world, that is not a person, it's a thing. So that's one of the connections to the poem I'm going to read you of mine in a moment, this idea of the incipient violence that circulates. And the other connection is an odd one. I wrote this poem not thinking about Dickinson at all, but for me, it was rare because it's rhymed. And I rhymed it in big, long 7-beat lines, 7 strong beats per line with a rhyme at the end. And then when we printed it out, it looked really weird because the lines wrapped. They were too long to go on the single line on the page. And then I thought, oh, bummer. Okay, I'll just break the line in half and make one, put one under the other so that they're kind of offset so that they look like they might be the continuation of a line. And then when I did it, I realized, oh my God, I'm in Dickinson's meter. I'm in the hymn meter. So I shocked myself. The poem is called The Eye of the Malign. The eye of the malign is a cold blue eye that stares from the heart of every scene. It laughs when you cry and cries when you laugh, like no other eye that's ever been. The symmetries of evil, little sport, and big flash on the eye's cold screen. If you let it into where you live, it will burn a hole without being seen. Sometimes it looks out from the waist of a dress on a woman in the dust, or it's on a ship too long at sea where the decking has turned to rust. Babies see it when they wake at night if strangers come to their cries. Horses patient in a dusky field run off if it's in the sunrise. Which way you turn doesn't matter in the end. The eye of the malign is there. Its saving grace, if grace there is that its gaze goes everywhere. Over to you, Julia.
I needed a little second there for that ending. This poem is in I guess, a very different register than Cammy's. And I guess I would say, rather than a sort of response to Dickinson, this poem has a kind of echo of Dickinson in it. And the last few lines of the poem just came quite naturally to me. And then I had to sort of go back and pull together what about this poem, My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun, was sort of trailing me in a sense. It's such a strange poem because you don't know where the power always lies in the poem, who has the power. This poem is about a very personal experience about a child in college who's gotten a tattoo. Not anything that maybe Dickinson would have expected her words to be used for. I'll just read it. Tattoo after sophomore year in college. Now a 19th century pistol a barmaid might have carried for protection hugs her flank, holstered to the long and shorter breaths she takes. Flower buds cascade beneath her breast, somewhat visible beneath an athletic bra. The skin still looks taut and sore, needled black lines, almost purple. She's eager to know what I think of it. I remember the undyed skin, smooth and tan, where there's now a gun loaded with blooms. And I can hear it too. The woods echo with other girls like you. May the mountains straight reply and keep you safe.
Fantastic, thank you. I want to just stop for a moment to say thank you so much to the Emily Dickinson Museum for this series. We are very grateful to be participating in it, and I agree with Julia, it's helped keep things going during the last difficult year plus heading into our second winter here. I want to thank especially Brooke Steinhauser, Patrick Fetcher, and Elizabeth Bradley, who's on here with us tonight, for being so hospitable and helpful and creative in their setting up of this program. And I also want to say thank you to all the attendees. We can see your names, but not your faces. We can read your comments in the chat. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And I hope someday we can see you in person. So after each set of poems we do, after each little series we do here, we're going to put a writing prompt in the chat just in case anyone would like to do it. We are teachers of long standing and we can't help ourselves. And we just happen to have some fairly juicy prompts. So we're going to give them to you. And if they inspire you, terrific, go off and write and have fun. And then just to remind you to put questions in the chat. We won't stop and talk about them until the end, but you can put them in at any time. And now we're going to move on to the next poem. So this is Dickinson's poem. After great pain, a formal feeling comes. The nerves sit ceremonious like tombs. The stiff heart questions, was it he that bore? And yesterday or centuries before?
The feet mechanical go round a wooden way of ground or air or aught, regardless grown, a court's contentment like a stone.
This is the hour of lead, remembered if outlived, as freezing persons recollect the snow. First chill, then stupor, then the letting go.
Mm.
Well, there are so many things about this poem that startled me. The phrasing, the surprising words, nerves sit ceremonious like tombs, nerves like tombs, the feet mechanical, the ground or air or aught. What are we standing on? Aught, nothing maybe. A quartz contentment. What is that? And then of course the hour of lead, which I felt I knew exactly what it meant and took it into my heart immediately. So the poem is about some great pain and the paralysis that follows it. And I found that I couldn't find a poem of mine that related to that exactly. So I decided to write one on the spot, which is probably a big mistake. And the first thing I did was I decided rather than trying to go to great pain, I would just make this a completely technical experiment. That is to say, I was just going to wrangle the words. So I don't know if you can see this, but I typed up the poem backwards to defamiliarize myself from it. And then I tried to use every word of the poem in a poem of my own. And you can see I started crossing off as I used the words. And I got part of the way typing, and then it went to handwriting because I sort of couldn't cope with the typing anymore. You can see I did some drawings and there are some other little notes. It was not going well. I shared it with someone who said, yeah, it sounds like Dickinson, mashed up and squished around. It's not your poem. So I released myself from the word by word idea. And then this really strange thing happened. I tried a million versions. I could wave them at you. I tried a villanelle. I tried nothing. I tried whatever. And then, for a lot of my poetic life, I've been writing about my father, who was a narcissist and impossible. And suddenly he came into this poem and rescued me, strangely. And it was odd because normally the poems about him are quite agitated, but this is very calm. And it has in it some of the leaden aspect of Dickinson's response to pain in the poem. So this is a moment for me of complete phosphorescence. And the first definition in the OED is shining in the dark without combustion. I just love that definition. And I think Dickinson does that so beautifully. So I took these strange phrases. My motto was I could now write what I want, but fit in as many of her words as possible. So I'm just going to quickly reread her poem so you have the words in your head, and then I'll read mine and then I'm done. After great pain, a formal feeling comes. The nerves sit ceremonious like tombs. The stiff heart questions, was it he that bore? And yesterday or centuries before? The feet mechanical go round a wooden way of ground or air or aught, regardless grown, a quartz contentment like a stone. This is the hour of lead, remembered if outlived, as freezing persons recollect the snow. First chill, then stupor, then the letting go. My poem is called Recollect, and it's a draft. I'm working on it right now. It looks like this. Recollect. Who was my father? Strange sojourner, still visiting my quiet living room, inducing stupor in my heart. Outlived, but set in the air. Stifling contentment, dead, he rounds on me, freezes me. It's my nerves. He spent all our money, took off when we were sick, but he cast a fizzy electric spell, like first snow. I'm cold, centuries old, stiff of limb and thought. Even so, he becomes easier to recollect. After the hours go round and round again, he comes regardless, deep in his tomb and in my time.
Mm. Mm. When Cammy sent me the first version of that, she said, I'm going to take the poem and I'm going to put it backwards, and then I'm going to include all the poems, all the words. And I thought, Cammy, it's just going to sound like you wrote Emily Dickinson badly. Why are you doing that? And then by pulling things out, the poem revealed itself to be really about something very personal and crucial, and is really wonderful to get. And that was because of phosphorescence. We were able to have that process together in the last couple of weeks. It's been so great. For me, After Great Pain, it's been a really important poem for me as a teacher. I developed a course called Writing and Healing, and I use this poem the first or second week of class every time I teach the class. And it is a poem that I ask the students to try to memorize. It goes better for some than for others. And you could see I had to read it when I was doing it with Cammy. I couldn't do all of it from memory. But for me, the poem is, of course, about Dickinson's ability to write, to articulate psychic space, to just get it so right, this feeling of trauma. I remember September 11th, 2000, right after the World Trade Center was hit, a cartoonist did a cartoon of this poem, and I cannot remember if it was Roz Chast or Linda Barry. And I looked and I've looked if anybody can find the cartoon, and I don't think it was the New Yorker who published it. I think it was the New York Times. Anyway, so I had been thinking about this poem a lot at the beginning of the pandemic, and this poem was written really close, early days. Just the weight of personal trauma, but really national and international trauma, thinking about how many of us on the planet were terrified about what was happening. Day begins. 5:40 a.m. and the light is yesterday's light, or rather today opens a replica of the day before, or the day has slipped, not yet begun, into the pocket of yesterday, seamless and quiet in its tucking in. The dog pushes the bedroom door ajar, and like the day, slips in, stretches rear up, head down, head up, rear down, patters and clicks to where my hand extends, and receives the pat to his side, the lick of my palm across his back, and exits. I watch to see if something new has arrived. I realize it is time to breathe, to patch the day before yesterday into yesterday, and that day into today, to make a plane, a simple level surface, a way toward day stream, a not beginning to begin, a clasping and a pinning down. Oh, I'm starting the next poem. I think we have a prompt for that one that's in the chat. Okay. I'm following my little script, Cammy. I got lost. Okay. I have it. You all probably know this poem too. We picked poems that were very familiar. I started early, took my dog, and visited the sea. The mermaids in the basement came out to look at me.
And frigates in the upper floor extended hempen hands, presuming me to be a mouse aground upon the sands.
But no man moved me till the tide went past my simple shoe, and past my apron and my belt, and past my bodice too.
And made as he would eat me up, as wholly as a dew upon a dandelion sleeve. And then I started too.
And he followed close behind. I felt his silver heel upon my ankle. Then my shoes would overflow with pearl.
Until we met the solid town, no one he seemed to know, and bowing with a mighty look at me, the sea withdrew. Okay, so I started early, I took my dog, and for me, that means I'm with my animal self too. And this poem for me is a very, very sexy one. She goes and there's the sea and the mermaids come. So not only the dog, but these powerful female creatures that are sort of human and sort of not, that live beneath the sea. There's something elemental and having to do with passion. The sea is figured as male, which is to me kind of interesting and different. And that sea creeps up her body, slowly but slowly, from her feet up to her bodice, her chest. And it seems to me to be a combination of frightening and violent and also beautiful and sexy. I think the line, "My shoes would overflow with pearl," is just spectacularly beautiful and unexpected in the way that Dickinson always is. And so it isn't just about, I'm saying sexy, but it isn't exactly that. It's the offer. It's the frigates are saying, come on, jump on board, come on out. Let's do some stuff. Let's get in some trouble. Let's get wet, get your whole body wet. And I love that. And yet there is something dangerous about it. There is something a little forbidden. It's put up against the town, the solid town, That's where we're all sort of supposed to be. We humans, we're in the town together. And at that point, the sea doesn't seem to know anybody in town. So the sea mightily withdraws, and there she is. So for me, it's about passion and possibly forbidden passion, and about a sort of gorgeousness that's on offer that might or might not be good. It's definitely fun, but it might not be good. So here's my poem. It's set in on Jones Beach, which is a huge ocean beach on Long Island where I grew up. It's pretty near where I grew up. And Jones Beach has real waves, like the ocean side of the Cape. You know, it's you can't just lounge around in the water. You have to be careful and know what you're doing, or you can get sucked under. Jones Beach, summer 2016. Just dip your toe in, and the ocean grabs your heel and your hull, staves your keel. It finds your fingers, fastens to your flesh, fans out, as when you lusted after that boy, or ran away for a day at 10, or smoked cigars like a man. The things you have done that you ought not to have done. Stealing from a locker, sex play with your sister on the sprung sofa in Oyster Bay. Seaweed drags at your waist, wants you to stop all this forever, do nothing but drift, because to yearn is to move, and to move is to inflict. When the tips of your toes touch the sand below, it billows into spires of hottest desires. Blue, your first marriage. You swerved towards someone else, had to have him, even as you knew it would all soon cool. Look, that wild green sea of life, and too much life that you have to turn and turn and turn from.
Hmm. Wow. um, so my poem takes us to a different landscape, but I loved Cammy, what you said about the animal self, that Dickinson has this way, and it's such a, in some ways it seems like an unusual poem for her, or not ordinary for her, and yet it had, it has all the markings of Dickinson's attention. And I just, the beginning of the poem always gets to me. I started early, took my dog. It just, it's so simple and so direct, and it just casts a whole landscape there, but weirdly, the dog kind of disappears from the poem, but weirdly, the dog still feels like it's there. So there have been many times when I've been walking with my dog where I see things in the world, or the walk itself gets me to think about things in the world that are all-consuming or confusing. And I think that that's part of what's interesting to me about that poem too. So this is Winter Walk. The ridge of snow overlays the last major, escaped from out under my breath. Now just the deep of cold. On our walk, the dog collapses in joy at the sniff of another dog, circle, squeal. All night, my hands had twitched under covers, dried out by the heart of heat we pump and burn, a dump of oil on oil. Universe consuming universe, our clamped up souls have no choice. The bird in the morning streams through the air, a delight of brown wing flashing against blue, a tease flying from bare branch to bare branch, dog half crazy with desire to hunt it down. He too clamped, the leash a tangle between us, sidewalk indistinguishable from street, walkways from porch stairs. There is no way to go, I tell him, standing between dirty barricades of snow. We slip in between the mess, my boots and his paws churning together against small caves of salt, dirt, black-brown snow, frozen tire marks and bands of ice. In morning light, at least, it's all crystal, and somehow we're led back to the center of the drift.
Thank you so much, Julia. That's gorgeous. So that's the end of the 3 poems we leapt off of together. We're just going to each take a moment now to close before taking your questions. And I'm going to go first by talking about 2 versions of the same Emily Dickinson poem. And I have to tell you, I am reading these and first saw them from the edition of Dickinson's Complete Poems by Thomas Johnson, where I learned them. And the second version of the poem is slightly different if you look at it in this Franklin edition, which is the more recent sort of official great edition of her poems. But I knew it from Johnson, so Johnson's what you're going to get. And I'm going to share screen just one time here so that you can see the 2 poems next to each other. I'm closing with this because this has to do with what it is in Dickinson that inspires me so much. This poem is about dead people waiting for the resurrection. So she's put herself, she's imagining them under the ground in their tombs waiting for the resurrection. Right there, we have something a little unexpected. So I will share screen so you can see the 2 versions. I'm going to read them both, and then I'm just going to talk about them a little bit and toss this over to Julia to finish us up. Julia, give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Fantastic. So I'm just going to read them. Safe in their alabaster chambers, untouched by morning and untouched by noon, sleep the meek members of the resurrection, rafter of satin and roof of stone. Light laughs the breeze in her castle above them, babbles the bee in a stolid ear, pipe the sweet birds in ignorant cadence. Ah, what sagacity perished here. I'll talk about this later, but before I read the second one, I just want to say there might be some unfamiliar words. Firmaments are heavens, diadems are crowns, and doges are the former rulers of Venice when it was a state. So this is the second version from 2 years later, 1861, according to Johnson. Safe in their alabaster chambers, untouched by morning and untouched by noon, lie the meek members of the resurrection, rafter of satin and roof of stone. Grand go the years in the crescent above them. Worlds scoop their arcs and firmaments row. Diadems drop and doges surrender, soundless as dots on a disk of snow. It still gives me chills to read that second verse of the second version, just absolute chills. And if you look at that last line, soundless as dots on a disk of snow, you think, soundless as dots? What does that even mean? I mean, a dot is kind of an abstract thing, and maybe abstract things don't have sounds, or maybe it refers to this disk of snow where I see sort of snow melting, you know, how it doesn't all melt the the same. Sometimes there are little discs left over and they get little dirt dots on them, and maybe that's what we're talking about. But anyway, it's all going to melt away, right? The snow is going to melt and the crowns are gone and the doges have surrendered. And that's just the little part of it. The big part of it is there are gigantic firmaments, heavens rowing around up there, or being in rows. And then there are worlds scooping their arcs. I see planets orbiting. And grand go the years in the crescent above them. The crescent, the big what? The big dome of the sky. I mean, it's an unimaginable sweep of time and space and a negation. It's almost like a bigger version of Ozymandias by Shelley, if you know that poem. You know, what does all our stuff add up to? It's a dot on a disk of snow, you know, bye-bye. But what's even more astonishing than the oddness and the scope is the transformation from the first version. Now, the second stanza of the first version, light laughs the breeze, etc. I mean, that's perfectly all right. It basically says happy things are happening on earth while those people underneath are waiting. You know, they're waiting for the resurrection. And meanwhile, life is going on. The horse is living its life. The scratches its innocent behind on a tree, to quote Auden. But, you know, so there's the surprise of the second version. There's the gigantic scope of it all. And then there is the difference between them that's so extreme. And I guess my feeling is she walked through a gigantic door between version 1 and version 2. Mm-hmm. She left the earth and went wide. And those people now, those people lying in their coffins, they are going to be there for a long time. And you might notice that in the first version, it says, sleep the meek members of the resurrection. But in the second version, it says, lie the meek members. So in the second version, they might be awake. Woo, for all those countries. So I'm just saying, she's opened the gate, and her message to me has always been, all gates are open, walk through them. Thank you.
So, Cammy, are you still sharing?
I am. I completely forgot. Thank you, Julia. I apologize.
Well, I think, Cammy, that what you really demonstrate there is her boldness. She was so bold in her revising and her rethinking of her work. It's just really amazing. I'm going to end our part of the program with a poem, but I want to say before I read it, so that I remember, I just want to thank everybody again for attending. So many people from so many different places. We're really glad to see all your names there scrolled up on the participant list. And again, thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Patrick, for putting this program together. After I'm done reading my poem, we'll take questions, and then that's it. We'll let you go. But my last poem is a poem by me, inspired by Jan Bervin's essay, Studies in Scale, which appears in Emily Dickinson's The Gorgeous Nothings. And I used Jan Bervin's, one of her quotes from that essay, in which she's also quoting Emily Dickinson. And the poem is really, when I read this quote, I was thinking about literary inheritance, the literary pantheon. How do we enter into it? And I think growing up, even though there was a lot of poetry in my life, and I became an English major, and then I got my PhD, there was a sense of being sort of outside of whatever that realm, that literary realm was. How do you get into it? Who do you belong to? And I always felt that though I loved Dickinson, I wasn't sure if she would recognize me as a, I don't know, third generation daughter of a working class Depression era person whose parents immigrated to the United States. You know, who are we in this little literary pantheon? And then I read this quote and things sort of came together. The poem is called Envelope Poem. And here's the quote from Jan Bervin. Emily Dickinson sent this minuscule 2-inch long pencil in a letter to the Bowles. And this is the quote from Emily Dickinson. If it had no pencil, would it try mine? Wryly nudging the Bowles to write back to her. It was enveloped in a letter, folded into thirds horizontally, pinned closed at each side. And that's Jan Bervin explaining that, that example of a gorgeous nothing. Like the poet, my mother wrote letters all her life, puzzling messages half in pencil, half in ink. She taped them laboriously instead of pinned them, each note almost the same. Instead of a pencil hinting us to write, a $5 bill, sometimes crimped into a small square, and when most mischievous, a single dollar folded many times, and have a cup of coffee, see you soon, God willing, scratched inside a greeting card from a mission she'd given money to, or on a quarter of a blue-lined sheet of loose leaf, and again wrapped and etched on that another note, kisses and hugs marked in X's and O's. Each edge of card or sheet snugly taped, the envelope itself, the envelope itself double sealed, especially the minuscule space between where the envelope's glue ends and no sealant lives. Now the notes addressed to my kids, and like Emily's command to the Bowles to write back, take your mother out for coffee, buy something, God bless. So my mother was my Emily Dickinson. I guess that's the point of that poem. Anyway, we're happy to take your questions or hear your thoughts, your words. We'll let Elizabeth take over.
Can I just say first, just thank you, Julia, because I had a really fun time doing this with you. And it's just so fun to work together. We don't get a chance to do it enough. So thanks.
Same. Thank you, Cammy.
This was so fun. The energy was so great. I know I'm gonna come back and talk now, but I could just keep on watching. So thank you for sharing your work. And when you were sharing that poem about your mother, I was thought of one of Dickinson's most beautiful lines, which is, a letter is a joy of earth. And indeed, a lot of her poems were sent as letters, sometimes in different variants. That was a conversation we were having in the chat. And I love the way that in this program, you've both woven in a creative epistolary exchange sort of into the reading through the responsive format of the program. So I'd love to know just a little bit more. And while I'm asking this question, this is my prompt for other people to put their questions in for me to ask next. I'd love to know a little bit more what role creative exchange with others has played in your work. Do you ever write poems in direct response, or do you want to take this in a completely different direction while we're on the epistolary theme? You could tell me if you write letter poems.
I could say one thing right off the bat, and that is when I was younger, I believed that it was impossible to learn anything about writing poetry. You either could do it or you couldn't, and you had to work at it. I'm not saying you didn't, but I believed that going to creative writing classes and all that kind of stuff was just not going to be helpful at all. You know, I don't know where I got that idea, but it was something, you know, the poetry had to come into my head from somewhere else. And I have learned that that is not the case for me, and that exchanges with other poets are really, really important to me. It's partly because it's a lonely trade in its essence. And it's really just nice to have fellow feeling. Julia and I have been reading each other's work, and for, I don't know, Julia, 30 years or something, a long time. Not every week, but from time to time, certainly. And we have even, you tend to sort of ride on the coattails of the people you're working with. If you see something interesting, yes, you can grab it. It is by way of being an exchange. It's not epistolary particularly, but it is a personal exchange. And so there's moral support to be had, but also looking at other people's creative methods can really change me. And from Julia, I think the thing that I love about her work is its frank honesty and use of the vernacular. It's just wonderful. And it's a corrective for me sometimes to hear her read. So that's what I'm saying.
Wow, Cammy, that is very, I have no response. I don't know what to say.
Better think of something. No, just kidding.
I know, really. Except I'll do this. I'll do this. We just got a fabulous review at Momig Review. It's out today, I think. Did you know that, Cammy?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much.
But yeah, no, it has been a really wonderful collaboration. We did work very intensively in a writing group for many years, and then we kind of separated, and now we have it's a very friendly divorce because we're still very good friends, even though we're not in the same writing group. But yeah, I think that those are so important. I've done a number of sort of different exchanges. Sometimes they're very intentional. Like I've done a couple of different sonnet circles with women poets from the Women Poets listserv. We used to call it, well, we still do call it WAMPO listserv. And that was a very rich experience where you take somebody's last line, it becomes your first line, and it's a sonnet circle. And I've also done, I'm doing these sort of one poem a day for the first week of every month with a group of poets. And sometimes I just steal the last line of the poet who came before me, and in tribute, try to write something the next day, because we're producing poems every day. So that kind of energy, I think, is really wonderful. And I don't know, I have reconnected with a couple of old friends, and we've reignited the email letter. I think we lost it with texting, and we're back now to sending each other big letters, and I like that very much. But I have to say that exchange that I had with Cammy, I was nervous when I first saw the first rendition of that poem Recollect that she read tonight, which is so amazing. When I saw the first one, I thought, I don't know if I can. I used to be very honest with her. I don't know if I can tell her. This just feels like Emily Dickinson backwards. I don't know what to tell her. And then I sort of and then, of course, she went off on her own. She knew what she was doing, and she came up with this beautiful poem. So, which is her and Emily. So, did you know I was so nervous to tell you that, Cammy?
No, not at all.
But I did tell you.
I see a couple of questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, I'd love to pull some of those out. It is very apparent that you are both teachers. That has been felt throughout the program, and I love that. And Emmett has a question related to that, and I also might kind of piggyback on it. So Emmett asks, what is both of your favorite Dickinson poem to teach? And in thinking about this, I loved what you said, Cammy, when you found a line in one of Dickinson's poems, and it was about this leaden feeling, and you said, I felt I knew exactly what it meant, and I took it into my heart immediately. So I'm also curious and as someone who teaches Dickinson myself, what have you been able to share about Dickinson that has felt immediately relevant, immediately eye-opening to students? And maybe those are the same, and maybe they're different. Choose your adventure in your answer.
Well, I mean, I love to teach. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The first line makes me crack up every time. There's something so amazingly bizarre. I heard a fly buzz when I died. And so it's easy, it's an easy hook, you know, and then once again, we're into an examination of God and self and death and nature and the meaning of sight. What does it mean to see? So you're in very deep water very quickly, but that engaging beginning, I think a lot of times she has a kind of slow acceleration, or maybe it's a quick acceleration, but she begins in a way. It's like I started early, took my dog. It's like what Julia said. So I love to teach that poem because you end up talking about what that little fly, what is that little fly that's buzzing just as she's dying? Is it a spark of life? Has it come to feast on her corpse? Because, you know, flies show up when things die. And it just kind of fascinates students who may not know much about Dickinson. And then it was there interposed a fly with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed. And then I could not see to see.
To see.
To see.
I think for me, and Emmett, thank you for your question. I think I know who Emmett is. All the poems that we read tonight, I love to teach. But the poem that I use sometimes, because I think that sometimes when students read Dickinson at first, they feel she's a closed book, that it's a riddle, they don't get it, what is she doing? So one of the poems that I recommend to them is this poem that seems in some ways a little simpler, but I don't think it is, because I think it, but you'll know it. Some keep the Sabbath going to church. I keep it staying at home with a bobolink for a chorister and an orchard for a dome. Some keep the Sabbath in surplice. I just wear my wings. And instead of tolling the bell for church, our little sexton sings, God preaches, a noted clergyman, and the sermon is never long. So instead of getting to heaven at last, I'm going all along. And I talk about the sort of the tone and the personality behind that poem. Who is this speaker? You know, what is she like? And it's a character, you know, that they can feel attached to. And I think it does help to unlock the rest of the poems for them. Or I want to think it does. I hope it does. Because it's just, you know, she's, you know, like my mother in my poem, just this mischievous character, you know, who really was bold to resist the conventions of her day, you know, really bold to resist the conventions of the way that one goes to church or honors the Sabbath. And I think you can see a lot of her in that poem. And I think that helps open up Dickinson studies for them a little bit. That's my hope.
All right. Well, we have 2 more questions in the chat. We'll see where we can get, or in the Q&A rather. And one was asking about this idea of literary legacy. And I think that's recalling the conversation about literary inheritance. What do you each think your literary legacy or perhaps inheritance is, aside from Dickinson, of course? And I love that discussion too. When you were describing whether Dickinson would recognize you, there was a piece of me that felt like it was like choosing a god or goddess in a pantheon to take you on. I like the concept.
That's great. I'd rather just stay right with that idea. Which of the poets I love would recognize me? That's kind of interesting.
Take that as a first line and run with it.
Yeah, I don't know. My the poets that I return to, they're so different from each other. Sylvia Plath always gets me writing if I'm stuck. I love Muriel Rukeyser, who couldn't be more different than Plath or Dickinson. Ruth Stone is somebody I always go back to. Lucille Clifton, Gwendolyn Brooks. Gwendolyn Brooks and Emily Dickinson, I think, when I need to, kind of focus, because they both want that form, whatever it is. They're, I don't know. Cammy, you want to take it? Take this question away from me.
Dickinson and Brooks, very important to me. And I think it is, I'd say, sort of a flirtation with form. It's a sort of pushing on the form really, really hard, but also being deeply, deeply familiar and handling it beautifully. And I really love both of them for that. But I'm sort of, I have to confess, I'm with the very, very dead poets a lot. So I love 19th century work. And, my dissertation was about Alfred Lord Tennyson, who is a very dead poet, but he has incredible music and a absolutely wonderful ambivalence about everything. Everything slides around in an uncertain way for him. And I just feel very sympathetic with that. There isn't much certainty in his work. And he also is a master of form. And I love that about him too. I love Yeats. I read Yeats a lot for consolation. I go way back. I can't read Greek, but I love Homer. I taught the Odyssey every year for 14 years, and then a few other times too. And it's deep in my bones, and I'm trying to learn Greek, but it's hopeless. If anybody has a quick and easy method to learn ancient Greek, including injection, I will take it. So
share that in the chat.
What's that? Yeah, put it in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to go, but we're having fun. So a final question when we're talking about things deep in our bones. Do either of you remember your first Dickinson poem? This was a question that came in the Q&A. The first one you encountered.
I remember the first one because I put it in this little poetry anthology in 6th grade. It's about the there is no frigate like a book to take me miles away. I don't remember the rest. That was my first. Yeah. And a frigate. Wow. And that's just how I feel about books and reading. I don't even know if I'm remembering it right. Am I? There is no.
You are. That's right.
Great.
And we talked about frigates today, so you're still on that voyage.
Yeah.
That's so eerie. I thought, what is the first one? And when you said that, I think it must have been in a child's, school anthology or something. There is no frigate like a book to take us lands away, nor any coursers like a page of prancing poetry. This traverse may the poorest take without oppress of toll. How frugal is the chariot that bears the human soul.
I think my teachers were a little worried about me. Oh,
that could be our perfect ending for the evening. You were, our chariots for the night. Thank you so much to both of you, Julia and Cammy. That was delightful. And a tremendous thank you to our listeners for sharing your time and your affirmations. So
Yes.
books from this series are available at the websites that we shared with you for these poets, also at Amherst Books, which is the official bookseller for the Phosphorescence series. So while this is our last Phosphorescence of 2021, the success of this series has inspired us to continue the program for a second year, beginning in March of 2022. And in fact, we are now seeking submissions. So if you are a poet or have a poet in your life, be sure to check out our call for proposals, which I'm going to put in the chat now. And we also invite you to check out our website where you can sign up for a monthly mailing list, where you can learn more about our programs and make a donation in support of free events like this one. So that will also be going into the chat. Take care, and we hope to see you again for Phosphorescence in 2022. Thank you so much. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good
Thanks,
night.
everybody. Thank you, Julia and Elizabeth.
Thank
Thanks
you,
a lot.
Cammy.
It was fun.
Thanks, Elizabeth. It was such a nice opening and closing too.
Thank you to everyone in the chat.